This Sunday on Capital Connection, the future of energy in Illinois.
The approach to decarbonization, we believe the most prudent way of doing that, where consumers win in the end, is based on competition.
How the state could reshape the future of natural gas and coal as they compete with nuclear for a larger share of Illinois' energy grid. State Senator Scott Bennett joins us with a look ahead at November's veto session.
Well, I think as you see, for example, too much emphasis on fossil fuels at a time when the areas we get it from are unstable.
Plus, from NRG, Judith Logano makes the case for natural gas as it wars with nuclear, and Illinois Democrats push toward a green energy grid. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
Visit Flora Gems during our annual estate sale. Find one-of-a-kind pieces up to 50% less than buying new. From vintage jewelry to modern engagement rings, let us help you find the perfect piece for a price you will love. October 15th through 19th in Champaign and October 22nd through 26th in Decatur.
Can bankruptcy help me save my house from a foreclosure?
Yes, bankruptcy can stop a foreclosure and let you pay off an arrearage or back taxes over 5 years. When you have a bankruptcy question, get the answers and the help you need. Go to WCIA.help.com or call Ostling & Associates, the state's largest bankruptcy-only law firm. For a free consultation, see us at any of our office locations. BCYHelp.com and Ostling & Associates, serving Illinois for 40 years.
Hold on to me, don't let me go. Your first name is free, last name is dumb.
Ford Edge. Drive it now for about $30,245. That's $6,430 in savings, or get 0 for 60 financing plus $3,750 bonus cash.
CBS Tonight.
The God account is going international.
Miles follows the clues.
Miles is coming to Paris?
Yeah.
And his heart.
Now come on, let's find out what your future is.
How are things in Paris with Kara? I was about to tell her I loved her, but the God account sent us a new clue. Why did the God account bring me all the way to Paris?
I think I know.
What are you talking about?
I need to tell you something.
New God Friended Me. CBS Tonight after 60 Minutes.
Hello, I'm Kevin Leidy, inviting WCIA3 viewers to join me on a wonderful adventure to see Iceland's Northern Lights, February 22nd to the 28th. Our fully guided tour includes an experience at the world-famous Blue Lagoon. Time to explore charming Reykjavik and discovering remarkable geothermal wonders and waterfalls. This wonderful vacation includes all airfare, great hotels, mini meals, and more. For more information and a free brochure, call Holiday Vacations at 1-800-826-2266.
Visit Flora Gems during our annual estate sale. Find one-of-a-kind pieces up to 50% less than buying new. From vintage jewelry to modern engagement rings, let us help you find the perfect piece for a price you will love. October 15th through 19th in Champaign and October 22nd through 26th in Decatur.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Joining us now is State Senator Scott Bennett from Champaign as veto session rapidly approaches us here, just a couple weeks away. Lawmakers will be back for a couple weeks to tie up some loose ends on 2019.
Right.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
What do you expect to see? Give us your preview of what we might see in terms of action in Springfield during that 2-week period.
I don't anticipate a lot of vetoes. There was a lot of overrides, rather, of those vetoes. There were a few over the summer that the governor put in, but honestly, this governor was very involved in the process itself, so helped kind of make sure if there was small things the governor didn't like in a bill, his staff would reach out to the legislator as we were going along. So there weren't a lot of surprise vetoes. Instead, there are some things we just need to clean up.
In marijuana legislation.
Marijuana legislation is a great example. They worked very hard on that for years.
What are those last little improvements or tweaks?
Well, I think in just terms of rolling that out and figuring out, where's the...
Intended?
That's good. In terms of just making sure that, when we get into municipalities, when we are setting up the cultivation centers, that they're licensed in the right way, the people that were supposed to have those opportunities are going to have those. And then right now, all the municipalities are setting up their tax rates, so I imagine some of the bills may go back and look at that as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting to see how the how the marijuana law is taking shape very differently in different parts of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Just in my, small district, just in the Champaign County area example, A college town like Champaign-Urbana is very interested in offering that. They are very interested in the revenue. But many of the small municipalities outside of Champaign-Urbana have early on expressed no interest in getting involved in that. And so, you definitely see, some people's kind of prejudices, I guess, about marijuana taking shape. But ultimately, everyone in the state will have an opportunity to purchase it if they want. They just might have to drive to another municipality and spend their tax dollars there.
Sure. So sort of in a similar lane with marijuana is agriculture, and this is something important to you in a big farm district.
Right.
Everyone talked about this year the rough planting season. We're entering harvest season now, where farmers are going out and gathering their crops and everything. How would you assess so far what Agriculture Director John Sullivan previously said on this program was a disastrous year for farmers? What have you seen in your district from farmers in that part of the state?
Well, my family still farms just outside of Champaign County. I'll be in a semi-all harvest starting in about 2 weeks. We're definitely going to have a late harvest because of the rain got a late planting season. The big issues is what happens, to the grain we had from last year that's still sitting in those bins. And a lot of this has to do with where the president and his trade negotiating team works out their tariff issues. I think that's the big issue. When you have weather plus the commodity prices, it's almost a perfect storm against Illinois agriculture. But we're working very hard to try to help certain of those things. In fact, a week ago, the governor signed an agreement with the country of Taiwan, who already was a market for Illinois agriculture, but now they're committing to even more purchasing. So we recognize that, hey, it's the #1 industry of the state. We've got to safeguard it, and we've got to find a market for all these products, even when the federal government is in some ways putting up some roadblocks.
What is the answer to that dilemma? If you find out that you've got a bunch of grain from 2018 in those bins, here comes the grain from 2019.
Right.
If you don't have a customer to take that 2018 product off your hands, what happens?
Disaster, honestly. And so that's been a problem the last several years.
They throw it out?
You have it only lasts for so long. So you'll see it in a lot of elevators, for example, in rural communities. They've got to get the really old stuff out of their giant bins so that they can get the new stuff in. So then they'll end up putting it out, or when they get too much of it, they'll end up putting it kind of on these giant tarps next to the fields. And if it rains or certain weather conditions apply, you end up losing a lot of it or wasting a lot of it. I don't have an answer for international trade policies.
But locally here, to the economy, to the market,
right.
I mean, there's crop insurance. But
there are, but crop insurance is more when weather. So, for example, when weather doesn't cooperate, it wouldn't apply to this. So, for example, there was a hard and fast cutoff date. There were areas of the state, typically kind of north. I would say like in the DeKalb area, Naperville area, where it was so wet they couldn't even plant their crops this year. And if they can't get their crops in by a certain date, then crop insurance would come into effect. But for those farmers who were able to get their crops in, but then there's just no market to sell them on, they're kind of on their own at the mercy of the markets.
And as farmers who deal in this medium with natural resources, using the earth and everything else, they're also looking at the environment, the things
right.
around it. What exactly is, so this is always interesting to me. It's a fascinating study. I think U of I looks at this a lot, but with the aquifer, with the plentiful resources that we have, right. What is it about this part of the state that is just, it's a natural hotbed for agriculture?
Well, I mean, historically, if you look back, a lot of it has to do with the glaciers. The reason it's so flat is, the glaciers pushed all this land and flattened out whatever the land was in northern parts of the United States, and then when it ended up leaving it here, it brought all those minerals and topsoil and dumped it right here. And then there's a lot of work that comes in. Even, then for thousands of years, not much grew on it. In areas like mine, they were flood areas, and then a lot of people had to work really hard to drain all those areas. But what we have are some of the most tillable, richest soil we have in the entire world in central Illinois. And we've made that into our largest industry of the state through a lot of work and a lot of generations who've toiled the soil. But the questions we have now are, how are we going to safeguard that going forward? So I know one of the issues we're working on right now with the soil and water conservation districts It's called the STAR program, and recognizing there's a lot of conservation efforts, things that we've put in the land that we haven't recognized, that, you know, certain things you put on top of the soil that could wash away really quickly, gets right into our water supply, gets right into the wells that those very farm families drink from. And that's just terrible for everybody. It's not good for long-term for agriculture. It's terrible for the environment. And so we're trying to promote certain practices like the STAR program is working on right now, to help farmers realize what are some, you know, affordable ways that they can conserve, that they can make sure that their efforts aren't wasted, and that ultimately will lead to better yields in years to come.
It's interesting that you mentioned that long view of how we got here, because there really isn't a guarantee that it's always going to be like this.
That's exactly right. There's plenty of areas across the country where you know, you get a certain period, like the Dust Bowl, for example, a certain number of years in a row where you're not getting the rain, or you're not, or too much of your topsoil blows away. There's where they had the floods earlier this spring in Iowa and Nebraska. I would watch certain farm programs where they would talk to a Iowa farmer that would say, I lost 2 years in this at least, because everything that was in my bins from last year, all gone. And I have no idea what's under this 4 feet of water, if the topsoil is there, or if it's 20 miles down the road. So we're all it's all weather related. You're very susceptible to the slightest change in climate and in the weather. And you know, farmers have recognized for a long time, for generations, that they're taking a huge gamble in what they do. But now they're up against a lot of other international forces, which make it even a tougher gamble for them.
You mentioned climate and weather there. To what extent is our energy production, our fossil fuel production, contributing to or possibly even harming our agricultural output or capabilities?
Well, I think as you see, for example, too much emphasis on fossil fuels at a time when the areas we get it from are unstable, right? In the news in the last few weeks, we've looked at, you know, Iran versus Saudi Arabia and their difficulties. And much of that dilemma, or why the United States would even get involved in that, is about protecting oil reserves. So, for example, if we relied less heavily on that, and found ways to make sure that we produced here in the United States our own energy, for example, we can get it cheaper, we can get it without the fluctuation that you have with international affairs.
We do produce a lot of natural gas and a lot of coal.
We certainly do. And in many of the fields that we're talking about, you'll see now windmills, giant turbines.
But
that producing that.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. It doesn't sound like you're saying let's produce more natural gas and coal here.
Well, no, I'm saying we need to make sure that we have a diverse portfolio, largely centered in the United States, where we can rely on it more. And by doing that, I think we ultimately will drive the cost of energy down, which will help farmers in the long run.
We just saw reports in the last week or two about Vistra closing down another coal plant in central Illinois. What is the prognosis or the outlook on the coal industry specifically in Illinois?
Well, it's a very tough industry, and it has been for a long time. And I mean, there was a part, not too distant part of our state's history, where you had coal mines all throughout central Illinois, even in my district. Those are long gone now, and now you'll see it largely just in southern Illinois. And often that coal isn't even used in Illinois, but is actually sold in other states. What we're left with, though, are all the different power plants. And a bill that I had called the Coal Ash Bill, Senate Bill 9, tried to deal with that, because any power plant that burns the coal, whether it's from Illinois or other states, leaves a pretty nasty byproduct that we have to figure out what to do with before it ends up getting into our water supply.
We started off the conversation looking at veto session and what was to come. For a while, there was some anticipation that there could be some traction, possibly some movement on the Clean Energy Jobs Act during veto session. Not entirely sure where that stands right now, but...
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. I'm not in all the negotiations. I know that they are, the different energy companies are coming together and trying to find, this is always happens in Springfield, you'll have competing bills from the nuclear, a couple years ago it was the nuclear power plants, and then the renewable energy fields, and sometimes the coal will come in as well. But ultimately, they got to find a balance, and they got to find what's one energy policy for the state going forward. I think what we have to be really careful on is to make sure the state, which is just trying to get its footing again on economic stability, isn't trying to put themselves in a place where they're going to bail out some major energy industry.
All right, well, very interesting. Senator Bennett, thanks for joining us. Veto session is still ahead. We'll be checking in with you to see how that effort goes for you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, we're back in just a moment.
Dear Adrenaline, you run in our veins. Let's hit the road with with the wind in our grills and the gravel under our wheels. Anytime you want to tear up some trails, just drop us a gas line. Your squad, Toyota Trucks.
Right now, get $1,500 customer cash on a new 2019 Tacoma or get 0% APR financing for 60 months on Tundra. Find yours at buyatoyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
Back by popular demand. When you shop Furniture Row, you pay what we pay. That's right. For a limited time, our employee pricing is available to everyone. Get 15% off a single item with purchases of $9.99 and up. That means you can save big on that perfect sofa, dining table, bed, or Denver Mattress brand mattress.
Our discount is your discount.
Plus, no interest until January 2022. But hurry, employee pricing at Furniture Row ends Thursday the 17th.
Many of us don't just wear jeans. We live and work in jeans, but we want them at prices we can afford. Blaine's Farm and Fleet has a huge selection of top name brands at great prices. And right now, all our jeans are on sale. Like all men's and women's Levi's Red Tab jeans, just $35.99. Men's Dickies Flex Denim jeans are half off, as low as $16.49. And men's Rustler jeans are only $12.99. That's genuine value from Blaine's Farm and Fleet. Don't miss Toyland. Wishes come true starting October 19th.
I got all the power, yep. 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 Yeah, I got all the power.
Hustle on into Menards and save 11% on all tools and fasteners.
Or you could get 11% off a brilliant chandelier.
Why not get 11% off a new vanity to update your bathroom?
Finish up those fall building projects and save 11%.
Make an entrance with 11% off all doors.
No matter the project, you'll get 11% off right now at Menards.
Save big money at Menards. You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
We've heard from several lawmakers already who are pushing forward with the Clean Energy Jobs Act. They hope to see that transition toward more renewable energies in the future. But where does that leave nuclear after the Future Energy Jobs Act of a few years ago? And what about other fossil fuels as well? Joining me now is Judith Logano from NRG, a natural gas company, also owns coal, a few other things.
Yes, so we're a competitive integrated power company. We have both wholesale generation and retail supply customers, retail customers, and wholesale generation throughout the country.
Understand. And there's this fight on the horizon here in Springfield about the future of these energy providers. I presume that's why you're here, is because there's been some discussion about tinkering with the rules of the road here.
So we're here to talk more about Illinois' clean energy future. We were here in the legislature in the spring. We raised a bill in the House and the Senate called the Competitive Clean Energy Act. The purpose of the act is to procure clean energy consistent with the governor's objectives of decarbonization in the electric sector. And we believe that our bill and our market design provides a faster way to a clean energy future at the least cost possible.
The governor's stated objective is to be carbon-free by 2050.
Carbon-free by 2050.
That sounds like we're getting rid of coal, we're getting rid of natural gas, we're getting rid of oil. They're going away. Yours is a company that will be very dramatically affected by that.
It's a transition from a supply mix that includes fossil-fired resources to one that's carbon-free in 2050.
How do you approach an executive of the 6th largest state in the country who has said in public that he wants to do away with essentially your company and negotiate with him?
So the approach to decarbonization, we believe the most prudent way of doing that, where consumers win in the end, is based on competition, right? Where we procure resources on a technology-neutral basis. No special interests, no handouts, no winners and losers, purely procuring resources on the least cost basis that meet the objectives of that policy.
So how does that look on the ground? In the Future Energy Jobs Act, which Governor Rauner signed into law back in, I believe, 2016.
2016.
And there were people at a power plant, at the Exelon power plant here in Clinton, Illinois, in central Illinois, 700 people between them and another plant, I believe Peoria, or in that part of the state, who were saying, look, if the state doesn't provide this bailout money, we're going to lose our jobs. And they were going to close down, and those 700 people would have been dramatically affected. You're saying the state shouldn't have done that.
Oh, so let's start out with the fact that the nuclear plants today are profitable. So this is not a subsidy, that's a handout. You know, I look at subsidies as payments to either failing or fledgling businesses, right? That is neither, right? So what we're talking about today is how to get to a cleaner energy future by incenting new technologies and innovation to get to a future where, frankly, we don't even know yet what technologies are going to be required. If we make decisions about procuring a large part of the supply mix based on one specific company and one specific technology for the next 10 years, you've frozen out for a large period of time, for a large portion of the marketplace, new technologies that, frankly, could have brought clean energy to Illinois consumers at a lower cost, at a quicker pace than what we've locked into. Let's not do that. Let's not freeze out technologies that we're going to have to rely on to get to the ultimate goal of 100% renewable by 2050.
Is there something about the production of nuclear energy that, or the capacity of nuclear energy that insulates it from some of the other market forces that might negatively impact natural gas or coal?
Well, nuclear tends to be large scale, right? So these are larger plants that don't...
They don't rise and fall really quickly.
They don't, we call that ramping. They don't cycle. They don't move quickly, right? They're not designed to do that. They're designed to come on and stay on for months at a time until there's a planned outage to do maintenance, right?
Natural gas and wind or solar are more seasonal, right?
So actually what happens, right? So when you think about nuclear as something that turns on, stays on, and it doesn't move, it's not flexible. It's an inflexible resource. Natural gas, like for example, quick starting, flexible natural gas can ramp up and down. It can shut on and off. It can come down at night. It can come off at night. It moves with demand. It's much more flexible. Renewable resources are dictated by Mother Nature. Mother Nature decides to what extent they operate, right? So very different. When think about natural gas, nuclear, renewable, very different attributes, right? But that's what we've got at this
It sounds
point.
like you're saying nuclear is the defensive lineman, the 350-pound football player, and natural gas is the running back, and you both want a 40-yard dash. And the state government's saying to the defensive lineman, we're going to give you a 2-second head start.
So you know what, Mark? I talk about shoes in analogies rather than sports. Just I don't know why.
The other half of our audience, yeah.
Right. So you know, one's a sneaker, one's a stiletto. You know, I mean, one's a sandal, right? But in the end of the day, I like to have all those in my closet, right? So, I think they all serve a purpose. But over time, to get to that carbon-free future where we have a lot of resources on the system that are not what I call dispatchable, right, we're going to need to continue to innovate, right, and incent new technologies to get there. And the best way to do that is to make the market as competitive as possible and not carve up the market and say, this is what we need for this and this is what we need for that. Let the market and let technologists tell us how best to get there.
I'm going to get into that let the market decide discussion in a moment, because that's an interesting political one nationwide and at the state level. But before we do that, when you're looking at something you said earlier really surprised me, that you want to meet the governor's goal of a fossil-free energy structure by 2050. But one of these industries or companies has to sort of roll over first, right? If it's coal,
well, we have to transform, right? To meet our climate objectives, we have to transform as an industry.
But is there really a 31-year expiration date on NRG, the company in Illinois?
We don't want to expire. We want to continue to be interested in doing business in Illinois and investing capital in Illinois. But what I want more than anything else is that I want to make those investment decisions on competitive markets that are not distorted by special interests and guaranteed profits to one particular technology type.
So how do you make that case to lawmakers who have already sort of put themselves out there? And they've already spoken and said, this is where I'm at. How do you approach them?
So we can't change what's happened in the past, right? We're not going to start over here. But what we can do is design a future in which we are open-minded, which we promote competitive markets, and we incent technologies to get to the destination that we all agree on that we want to get to. The path, how you get there, right? Very important.
So right now you think nuclear has too much of a foothold, too much of the market share in Illinois. You don't want to see them so protected by the state regulations.
Well, first of all, handouts are a bad thing for competitive markets, right?
And I think some of your literature has also said a bad thing for energy bills for customers at home.
Absolutely.
How do you connect those dots?
Which dots?
The dots between the handout and the energy bills going up.
Oh, well, a handout, you know, market forces solve for the least cost solution, right? When we decide that we're going to make choices outside of the market, then we've introduced kind of artificial pricing in the marketplace, right? And that has unintended consequences, sometimes some intention, some unintended consequences. And it starts to kind of shift around, you know, the economics of energy supply.
That's the tangle of government and public utilities, right? Energy is not like a nicety or a luxury that, well, maybe I'll afford it this month and maybe I won't the next.
Right, but it's a critical part of life. Right, energy supply. We're not selling shoes. To go back to we are selling the lifeblood of an economy, right? It is absolutely imperative that we do that with thoughtful mechanisms, right? That we don't do this in a rush. We don't do it in a haste, right? We're setting policy for the next 30 years. We need to be thoughtful about the way we do that, right? Because we agree we have to get there.
All right, Julia Logano from NRG, thank you for joining us. An interesting discussion. We're back in just a moment.
Senior lifestyle and memory care options vary widely, and the choices can be overwhelming. At Carriage Crossing Senior Living, we are your senior living and memory care resource. Offering the best in lifestyle amenities and personal care services, 24-hour personal care staff, enrichment opportunities, plus delightful farm-to-table meals. Our 2 beautiful locations provide dementia care that supports families with as much compassion as we have for our residents. Exceptional care, extraordinary people. Carriage Crossing Senior Living.
Hi folks, Van for Heel to Toe Shoes at 106 West Main, downtown Urbana. It's October, so you know what that means. It's sale time. Save 10 to 20% off store-wide now through the end of the month.
With the all-new Silverado HD, Silverado is now the only truck brand that can offer trucks with best-in-class towing, or trucks with best-in-class camera technology, or larger, more functional beds than any competitor. The only truck that can compare to a Silverado is another Silverado. Or get a total value of over $9,500 on this Silverado with a larger, more functional bed than any competitor. Or during truck month, make no monthly payments for 90 days. Find new roads at your local Chevy dealer.
Home. It's where families gather. Life's triumphs and challenges are shared, and lasting memories are made. Busey's here to help you achieve your dream of owning a home. Whether you're just starting out or upgrading to your dream home, Busey will guide you every step of the way, because we know there's no place like home. Busey, your dream, our promise.
Join us October 23rd for the first ever H-Strong Conference. Enjoy a presentation by local TV personality Judy Frazier, a free lunch, prizes, and more. Space is limited, so call now to register for this free event, October 23rd at the Hilton Garden Inn.
Thanks for watching. We'll hope you join us as the State House inches closer to veto session and lawmakers return to Springfield. We'll have all those updates for you in the weeks to come. We'll hope you'll join us again next week. For Capital Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell.
Stay connected to the Capitol all week. Follow us on Twitter at CapConnectIL or watch reports from our Capitol team on WCIA 3. You can also find us on Facebook or WCIA.com.